Hola clase, this is podcast 212, Spanish 2, Unit 1, Video 2. The topic for the video is Los verbos reflexivos, reflexive verbs, part A. You need to be taking notes in your notebook. I'm going to cut out really quick and show you how you need to set up today's notes. Okay, so in your notebooks, you are going to be setting up today's notes behind the table of contents, behind the Spanish 1 review flip chart. So you're going to be working on pages 2 and 3 in your notebook. This is going to be set up in a couple of parts. So on page 3, you're going to be taking the notes that we're going through in the podcast today. On page 2, you're going to glue in the sheet you grabbed from the classroom where we're going to practice conjugating reflexive verbs. And then you also are going to have a pocket to put your tangibles in. So before you left class, you should have grabbed 5 green sheets of paper, 10 yellow sheets of paper, and then 10 orange sheets of paper. What I wanted you to do with those is on the green sheets, you're going to write the reflexive pronouns. So will you pause the podcast now and write on those 5 green sheets of paper these 5 pronouns, me, te, se, nos, and se. On the yellow sheets of paper, I wanted you to write the regular present tense verb endings. So you're going to have one O for the yo ending, since those are the same for all verbs. Then you're going to need as and es. You're going to need a and e. Then you need 3 nosotros endings. You need amos, hemos, and imos. And lastly, you will need an and en. Pause the video now so you can get those all written on your yellow sheets. All right, also on your orange sheets, you're going to write some of our reflexive verbs. Here are some that I would like you to write on there. Arreglar, bañar, acostar. Make sure you note the stem change in acostar. Poner, vestir. Again, make sure to note the stem change. Peinar, rasurar, cepillar. That's 8. I would like you to include maquillar and despertar. Make sure to note that stem change. After you have all of those sheets of paper filled out, we're going to work with those tangibles after we go through the notes a little bit. So just put those to the side in your envelope or pocket that you made. In the classroom, I also told you to grab a little caution symbol, un símbolo de cuidado. I would like you to glue that into your notes somewhere on the side, on the bottom, because we're going to include that as a warning when we're conjugating. So just go ahead and glue that somewhere by the bottom of your page. Okay, so now that you have your notebook set up for today's notes, let's go ahead and start discussing reflexive verbs. We've already been using them in class, but now I want to give you a formal definition. So, the definition of a reflexive verb is a verb that has the same doer and receiver. Verb with the same doer and receiver. In other words, it's a verb where the action reflects back onto the subject. For example, I bathe myself. In this sentence, I'm the subject, I'm doing the bathing, and I'm receiving the bathing. I'm doing it to myself. So let's talk about lavar. Lavar means to wash. In English, I can wash the car, I can wash my son Jackson, or I can wash my own face. In those three examples, if I'm washing the car or if I'm washing Jackson, it is not reflexive because something else receives the action. But when I'm washing my own face, it's reflexive because I'm doing it to myself. Hopefully that helps you visualize or understand what reflexive means when you're doing it back onto yourself. We've been using a reflexive verb, and you probably didn't even know it. It's the verb llamarse. Okay, because in Spanish 1, I would ask you all the time, ¿Cómo te llamas? The popular or the common translation of ¿Cómo te llamas? Is what is your name? But the literal translation is what do you call yourself, or how do you call yourself? And when you answer that, I'm going to use a darker pen so you can see better. When you answer that and you say, yo me llamo Breezy, you are saying, I call myself Breezy. So this is a reflexive verb right here. You have a verb and a reflexive pronoun. All right, so now that you see an example, now that you know what the definition is and you've seen how we've already used reflexive verbs, let's talk about how you're going to conjugate reflexive verbs. When you conjugate, in order to conjugate, you need two parts. You need two parts. You're going to include a reflexive pronoun and the verb. All right, so under where you wrote the reflexive pronoun, let's make a chart. Also, under your verb, we're going to make 3 charts. The third chart, you're going to write it under. I'm going to write it to the side since I ran out of whiteboard space. Okay, so let's review the verb endings first. So we're reviewing present tense verb endings. If you have an AR verb, your present tense endings are o, as, a, amos, and an. That you should hopefully remember by now. If you have an ER verb, your endings are o, es, e, hemos, en. And lastly, if you have an IR verb you're conjugating, your endings are o, es, e, hemos, en. Now, when you are changing a verb into a reflexive verb, you do so by adding the reflexive pronoun. There are 5 reflexive pronouns. We have me, te, se, nos, and se. Me, te, se, nos, and se. Why I had you put these in charts is because I wanted you to see that when you include both parts in a conjugated verb, you're going to match up whatever verb ending you're using with the reflexive pronoun. So if the verb I'm using is to, and you have an as as your ending, it's going to match the reflexive pronoun te. Whatever you're selecting in the charts will match. So let's do some examples here. Let's take the reflexive verb do, char, se. So this has 2 parts in it already. We have the verb do, char and the reflexive pronoun se. So when we go to conjugate this, we're not even going to worry about the se at the beginning. We're just going to take it off, deal with it later. But now we need to conjugate do, char like we normally would. So let's chop off that AR and let's conjugate. So yo ducho, duchas, ducha, duchamos, duchan. Nothing's different there. It conjugated completely like normal. Nothing's different. But now we have to worry about that reflexive pronoun. We cannot have a reflexive verb without a reflexive pronoun. So we're going to take the pronouns you had written down and match them up. So to match the yo ending, we use me. To match the tu ending, we use te. To match the el, ella, usted ending, se. To go with nosotros, we use nos, and to go with ellos, we would use se. Okay, so now you can see the complete reflexive verbs. So if you're saying, I shower myself, I take a shower, you would say, yo me ducho. For you take a shower, you shower yourself, tú te duchas. For she takes a shower, se ducha, ella se ducha. For we take a shower after practice, you could say, nosotros nos duchamos. And for they shower themselves, ellos se duchan. Here's where my word of caution comes in. That's why we have this caution symbol. Reflexive verbs are still going to conjugate like normal. The only thing we're adding to it are these reflexive pronouns. So when you're conjugating, you need to watch out for irregulars. You cannot forget to stem change. You cannot forget to change it to a go if it's go verbs, and you cannot change the way ear is conjugated. All of those are still going to follow the normal conjugations. All right, with that word of caution, let's talk about some of those irregulars that you still have to be careful for. Let's take, for example, despertarse. Despertar and se. Okay, so while we're conjugating, we're not even going to worry about the se. We're going to deal with that last. Let's just conjugate this. I told you this is a stem changer. So we are going to change this E to an IE when it's conjugated. So the yo form would not be desperto, it would be despierto. The tu form is despiertas. The el, ella form is despierta. Nosotros despertamos, ran out of room again, and ellos despiertan. If you cannot remember stem changers, you need to refer back to those level 1 review notes so that you remember stem changers are boot verbs and what you need to do for them. But remember, reflexive verbs have 2 parts, the pronoun and the verb. So we have to go back and add in the se, but make it match the ending. So again, for a yo ending, you add me. The complete reflexive is yo me despierto. For a tu verb, you add te. Tu te despiertas. For a he or she, for él o ella, it is se. Él se despierta. For nosotros, we have nosotros nos despertamos, and for ellos, ellos se despiertan. So there is an example of conjugating a reflexive when it's irregular because it's a stem changer. Let's do an example of an irregular go verb. Our go verb for this chapter is ponerse. Ponerse. So again, let's not worry about that reflexive pronoun to start with. Let's just worry about conjugating it. So, the yo form is a go verb. It is not going to be pono, it's going to be pongo. But then it goes back to normal. So it's tu pones, él pone, nosotros ponemos, ellos ponen. So this is our last example of conjugating a reflexive. Remember, it needs two parts. You have to have the reflexive pronoun and the verb. So now we have to take that se and put it in the front and make it match. So for yo, we use me. Yo me pongo. Tú te pones. Él se pone. Nosotros nos ponemos. Ellos se ponen. Okay, so now you've completed your sheet of notes. You have your regular notes, the word of caution, and some examples to go with it. You also have the envelope you've completed with your tangibles. So let's do some examples together. Here's how these tangibles will work. When you see, let's take an easy one to start. Let's do cepillar. When you first see this reflexive verb, you're going to see cepillar se. Okay? But when we conjugate it, remember, we're not even going to deal with the reflexive pronoun yet. We're just going to conjugate this like normal. This is an AR verb. So we have yo cepillo. Tú cepillas. Él o ella cepilla. Nosotros cepillamos, and ellos cepillan. Nothing is different there. Conjugate like normal, but we're going to have to match up that reflexive pronoun. So, when you have cepillo, the yo ending matches me. Yo me cepillo is that whole reflexive verb. When you change it to cepillas, you have to make the pronoun match. So it's tú te cepillas. Let's keep going. Él se cepilla. Nosotros nos cepillamos. And ellos se cepillan. The first evidence I'm going to look for that you watched this podcast is having all of those tangibles filled out and ready to go in your notebook. The second task of evidence I'm going to look for is you completing this practice sheet. So I would like you to conjugate all of these reflexive verbs for the subject given and then complete these 5 sentences.